Hey everyone, if you're gearing up for the bar exam, you already know governmental accounting can be a real headache. Well, in this explainer, we are going to break down the Annual Comprehensive Financial Report, or ACFR, and give you a super clear, rule-based framework so you can absolutely crush this section on exam day. Let's get right into it.
So, we're deliberately combining a few things here: the format of the financial section, the MD&A, the notes, RSI, and the whole reporting entity concept. Why? Because the CPA exam is smart. It's not going to ask about these things in a vacuum. It wants to know if you understand how the entire reporting package fits together. Nailing those connections is how you're going to score the points. All right, here's our plan of attack. We'll kick off with the big picture, then we'll drill down into the non-negotiable order of the financial section. After that, we'll get into the key distinctions between the components, solve that reporting entity puzzle, apply the rules with a great example, and then wrap it all up with your exam day checklist.
Okay, first things first, the ACFR big picture. I want you to think of the ACFR as the complete financial story of a government for an entire year. And for the exam, you've got to know exactly how that story is organized, chapter by chapter.
So the ACFR has three main sections. You've got the Introductory, the Financial, and the Statistical. Now, it's good to know they all exist, but for the exam, you need to put on your blinders and focus right in on that middle one, the Financial section. That's the heart of the report, and trust me, that's where nearly all the questions are going to come from. So, let's zoom in on that all-important financial section. This brings us to what is, without a doubt, one of the most heavily tested parts of this whole topic: the exact order of the components. And let me be clear, this isn't just a nice-to-know detail. It's a sequence you absolutely have to burn into your memory. And here it is, the mandatory four-part order. It always starts with Management's Discussion and Analysis, or MD&A. Right after that, you get the basic financial statements themselves. Following the statements, you'll find the notes. And finally, you have the Other Required Supplementary Information, or RSI. You have to know this cold: MD&A, statements, notes, then Other RSI. Okay, so we've got the order down. Now let's actually break down what each of these components does. You see, the exam just loves to test whether you know the specific role of each part, and this is huge, whether it's officially considered part of the basic financial statements. It all comes down to classification. So first up is the MD&A. This is basically management telling the story behind the numbers in plain English. It's a narrative. But here's the absolute killer point for the exam. Even though it comes first, the MD&A is classified as Required Supplementary Information, RSI. It is not part of the basic financial statements. Remember that. Next up, we have the basic financial statements. You'll generally see two flavors. You've got the government-wide statements, which use full accrual accounting, like a regular business, because they're focused on the long-term economic picture. Then you have the governmental fund statements, which use modified accrual. Why? Because their focus is on the short term, on what's available to spend right now.
Okay, after the statements themselves, we get the notes. The notes give you all the juicy details, the accounting policies, the breakdowns of balances, everything you need to really understand the numbers. And this leads us to one of the biggest rules to remember. Unlike the MD&A, the notes are considered an integral part of the basic financial statements. They're not optional, they're essential.
And finally, after the notes, we find the Other RSI. Think of this as extra info that accounting standards say is required for context, but it's not part of the core audited financial statements. This is where you'll find things like pension schedules and a very common exam favorite, the budgetary comparison schedule. And just like its cousin, the MD&A, this Other RSI is not part of the basic financial statements.
So, let's just pause and boil this all down into one simple can't-forget rule. The notes are in, they are part of the basic financial statements. The MD&A and the Other RSI are out, they are supplementary information. This is a classic exam trap, so please lock this distinction in your brain. Okay, great. We've totally nailed the structure of the report. But now we have to ask a different question. Whose information are we even looking at? This brings us to the reporting entity puzzle, and it's all about the primary government and these things called component units.
And really, this is the central question, right? When a city issues its financial report, whose financials are we actually looking at? Is it just the city itself, or does it also include, say, the local school district or the public library? Well, the answer is, it depends on who is financially accountable. And that's where this term component unit comes into play. A component unit is its own legally separate thing, but the primary government's elected officials are ultimately on the hook for it financially.
A classic example is a public housing authority that operates on its own day-to-day, but the city government is still in control of its finances.
Now, once you decide something is a component unit, you have to include it in the report in one of two ways. First, you have blended presentation. This is when the component unit is so intertwined with the government, it's basically the same thing. So you just combine its finances right into the government's funds. The other option is discrete presentation, where you show the unit in its own separate, distinct column.
Let's really hammer this home, because for the exam, the key words are everything. When you see blended, I want you to immediately think combined. When you see discrete, think separate. Blended equals combined, discrete equals separate. It's a simple association, but getting it right is the key to cracking these questions.
All right, knowing the rules is one thing, but applying them under pressure is what gets you a passing score. So let's walk through a classic example, and then I'll point out the common traps the exam loves to set for you on this topic. Okay, meet the city of Ridgefield. It has two component units. First, the Transportation Authority. The city appoints its board, and here's the key, it only serves the city. Since it's basically part of the city's operations, it gets blended or combined. Now look at the Regional Water Authority. The city has some say, but it serves multiple cities. Because it doesn't primarily serve Ridgefield, it fails the blending test and has to be presented discretely in its own separate column.
And these examples point us right to the traps you'll see on the exam. So many people mix up the narrative MD&A with the essential notes. They'll incorrectly treat RSI as part of the basic statements. They'll forget that critical order we memorized. And of course, they'll misclassify a component unit because they didn't focus on who it really serves. Don't let that be you.
So how do you avoid those traps? Use a system. On exam day, for any question on this topic, just ask yourself these 4 things. 1. What part of the report is this? 2. Is it the narrative MD&A, a statement, a note, or other RSI? 3. Are we talking about the primary government or a component unit? And 4. If it is a component unit, should it be blended or discrete? This step-by-step process will lead you straight to the right answer. We have covered a ton of ground here. So before we wrap up, let's pull it all together into one final checklist of the absolute must-know rules you'll need on exam day.
One more time because it is that critical. The order of the financial section is set in stone. It's management's discussion and analysis, then the basic financial statements, followed by the notes, and finally, the other required supplementary information. That order is everything.
And let's lock in those other core rules. Number 1, the notes are in the basic statements. Number 2, all RSI is out of the basic statements. Number 3, blended means combined. And number 4, discrete means separate. If you can burn just these 4 rules into your brain, you'll be in fantastic shape.
So what's the real takeaway here? It's all about having a game plan. When that question pops up on your screen, run through this 5-step checklist. Identify the section, apply the order, decide if it's in or out, identify the entity, and classify the unit. This framework isn't just about memorizing facts. It's about systematically dismantling the question so you can answer it quickly and with total confidence. Now go use this framework and you'll master this topic.